Well, everybody, welcome to the latest edition of Goodison Park, my home, and it's a real pleasure to welcome a long-time friend of mine, Dr. David France, to the studio today. It's a real change of pace for us today, whereas the series will always predominantly be about former players like managers and club directors come and go, but it's the fans with the lifeblood of Everton Football Club. And Dr. David France, he doesn't mind me calling him an Everton superfan from his homes in North America. So David France was the founder and driving force of numerous initiatives related to Everton Football Club, the Gladys Street Hall of Fame since 1996, the Everton Former Players Foundation since 1999, the Everton Heritage Society since 2008, and the Everton Collection since 2007, which was the greatest one-club collection of memorabilia in the entire football world. The Everton War Memorial since 2011. He's also authored 19 Everton books since 1997, with proceeds donated to Merseyside charities. Liverpool's Freedom of the City panel rewarded him with the prestigious title of Citizen of Honour in 2011, the first person to receive it for services to Merseyside football since a certain Bill Shankly. The following year received an OBE for services to football in the United Kingdom and Europe, and he's the life president of the Everton Shareholders Association. So welcome, David, Dr. Everton. Evertonian extraordinaire.
Well, thank you for that introduction. I couldn't have written it better myself. It's great to be back on Merseyside, where the weather is terrible, but the people are lovely.
Yeah, a stark contrast from his usual base in Arizona. But I mean, it started in Widnes just after the Second World War. There, you were never too enamoured with the oval ball, the calling, as you call it in your autobiography, of Mama Blue, and Goodison Park was there from an early age. Several generations of Evertonians in the France family, and it was always the way for you, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'm a fifth generation Evertonian. One of my relatives who came from Runcorn, he owned 3 of the original shares, so we go back quite a way. It was handed down like an heirloom from one member of the family generation to the next. My mum was a Geordie, so she converted to being an Evertonian, but my dad and his brother's grandfather, they were die-hard Evertonians. I was indoctrinated by my grandfather, who was a lifeblood Evertonian, and he told me tales of Dixie Dean, Tommy Lawton, Warney Creswell, Joe Mercer, and because both of my parents worked in Widnes, I spent a lot of time after school as a tot, going, with my grandparents, and this was in the days of food rationing, just after the war, and he had an allotment where he kept chickens. Yeah. There's a reason for me telling you this story.
Oh, it says.
And he made the mistake of naming these chickens. So there was Warney Creswell, there was Ted Sager, there was Joe Mercer, etc. And my grandmother wasn't a keen Evertonian.
Okay.
Actually, she wasn't the nicest as a person, and I'll explain this to you, because one lunchtime I was having my lunch with them, and she'd made some soup. Yeah. And she said to me, David, how's the soup? And I said, it's smashing, Grandma. And she said, you do realise you're eating Dixie Dean.
Wow. Of all of them, to give you Dixie as well.
She was quite a cruel son, so.
And from an early age, though, you've still got those vivid memories of that first visit to Goodison Park, and even the colours that it brought.
Yeah, I was a sick kid. Yeah. And a poorly sick kid. I'd been in isolation hospital in St Helens, which is, it's a painful experience for anybody from Widnes. I was a sick kid, a small kid, and I was regarded as being a bit slow.
Oh, so, really?
And I was treated as being a bit slow. A nice lad, but our day was a bit slow. And so my mother, my father wanted me to go to Goodison at a very early age, but my mother stopped that. I think she wanted me to have a happy childhood. And so it was 9 by the time I'd got out of the isolation hospital, and my mum had agreed for my dad to take me to Goodison. We were born, I tell everybody this, as you may know, we were raised in a slum with one light bulb and one cold tap. And I'm not playing the violin here. A lot of people listening to this of the bald age of 70 will know that that's what life was like back then. But my dad somehow had got a car. I don't know where it came from. It was of mysterious provenance, and he took me in this car to Goodison, and we parked by the Arkles pub near Anfield. He wanted to show me Anfield as well, and my dad was a labourer, big strapping fella. He was a boxer come semi-professional footballer, and he carried a milk crate, a galvanised metal milk crate, and we walked across Stanley Park. And as we got closer and closer, he got excited, and of course I got excited, And as we reached Goodison, it was in the days before the floodlights were in place, the pylons were in place, but they hadn't been switched on yet. They hadn't been commissioned. That was the following week. It was a midweek game against Manchester United. I think it was something like a 6:15 kickoff, so it was an unusual time. And there was like 73,000 people there, packed in Goodison, and he took me into the paddock. He threatened to take me into the boys' pen, but that's a different story. But he took me into the paddock because I was such a small kid, and he put the milk crate against the wall, and so I could look over it. And I just, you get this great sense. I get this every time I go to Goodison. It's just this magical kind of biblical place. My first memories of it is that they had a church in the corner.
Of course.
And my dad said that's because God likes to keep an eye on his favourite team. I mean, I was brainwashed as a kid. And these pylons, they punctured the heavens. And in those days, they had the 4 stands, had the crisscross balconies on them. So it was magical. And I said there were 70,000 people in there. But what amazed me the most is the grass. I was from Widnes. We didn't have grass. We were polluted in the chemical industry in the 50s. And, I can't tell you where the nearest grass was to our house. We lived in the centre of the town. It must have been a mile away. And so I wasn't familiar. When we played rugby league, we played on cinders. So we didn't have grass in school. And I just overwhelmed by this manicured grass and the white lines and everything. But as I said, it was like a religious experience. I remember the smells of Brill Cream and Woodbine cigarettes. It was like you could make some religious connection with that. There was no chanting, there was no singing in those days. It was just the great oohs and ahs of being at a football match. But there was something I always remember is that as the ground got filled, people were being passed overhead like some kind of sacrifice. And I also remember that on the other side of the wall, the perimeter wall, they had the numbers for the half-time score. And they ran out of numbers after the Z, and they went to hearts, diamonds, etc. And I thought that was some kind of message from some spiritual message or whatever. It was 3-3. The game was 3-3 against the Busby Babes. They were the champions of England. A few months later, they perished at Munich. And I have to say, every kid in Widnes knew the names of the Manchester United team. And if you're going to test me now, I'll impress you with my short-term memory. It was... Woods was in goal. Bill Fowkes and Roger Byrne, who was the captain of England as well. There was Eddie Coleman, Jackie Blanchflower, who was Danny Blanchflower's brother. He finished in a wheelchair after the Munich. The great Duncan Edwards, who of course perished there. There was John Berry, who was a winger for England. Liam Whelan, Tommy Taylor, who was the goal scorer, Dennis Filer and David Pegg. And all kids knew that. The Everton team was just a mixture of local lads, and whether, the Tanses and the Dunlops and the Jones and the Harrises, Fielding, Dave Hickson, and Derek Temple. And Derek scored twice that game. And young Derek Temple. For a period in my life, I've told this Derek many times, he was my hero. But it didn't last long. It did resurge as my hero in 1966. But he was my hero at my first game.
I mean, as you mentioned there, as great an Evertonian as ever was, Dave Hicks, and I guess he must have stood out there. I mean,
he did. He scored
just his blonde hair.
He scored the winner. I'm saying it finished 3-3, but he scored the winner in the days before VAR, and it was disallowed because I think he'd punched someone on the way to heading the ball.
Even then,
so it was this great sigh. You know, we were 3-1 down at half time. We fought back to 3-3, and we had a goal disallowed towards the end.
Yeah. So it lived up to all your expectations. You said that you've been indoctrinated from an early age, but yeah.
It was this wonderful experience. Yeah. And what I enjoyed, I think, equally as much as it, on the way back, my dad spoke to me because we didn't really, in those days, fathers didn't spend much time with the kids. Yeah. And it was about the only thing we'd ever connected on. Yeah. And I thought, this is great, you know, going to the match with your dad and him talking about the match with you and listening to you. Yeah. I thought that was very special. I didn't go to the match many times with him on my own. Yeah. And we went later on in my life. We went as a family with my uncles and my mother, etc. Yeah. But I didn't go to the match. It sounds very unusual. I didn't go to the match very much on my own. I think I was just a disappointment to them.
Wow. Yeah, if only you knew. If only you knew. Yeah. But we moved on. We're going to focus on certain games which are big, momentous occasions in Everton's history and your watching of Everton. We move on to a very different era now. The 50s were a tough time for Everton, but come the 60s, they had the backing of John Moores, of course, and spending big. The Mersey Millionaires, as incredible as that might seem now to younger generations. And it's a game towards the earlier part of that period against, even back then, dirty Leeds, as it were, Leeds United. The players were actually, for those younger ones who might not be aware of this, the players were actually taken off the pitch to calm down by the referee. Such were tempers were fraying. You wanted to mention this as one of your great games at Goodison.
Yeah, it was a memorable game, wasn't it? It's a great game. You know, you got to remember, during that time, we'd got Bobby Collins had come in from Scotland. He'd revolutionised the team. We'd got Roy Vernon, Tommy Ring, Jimmy Gabriel, Alex Young has arrived. We'd won the title. Yeah. The year before, I think we'd won the title. Come 64, Leeds had been promoted that season. Mm-hmm. I think they had been promoted that season, and we'd played them in the cup and that had been somewhat of an industrial game. Yeah. And they arrived at Goodison full of evil. Yeah, I mean, you can name the names, and I mean, I'm sure they're really nice guys that are good to the mothers. But you know, you had Billy Bremner, Norman Hunter, Jack Charlton, Peter Lorimer, Johnny Giles was no saint, and of course he had Bobby Collins.
Yeah, little Bobby was playing for them by
who we'd let go. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the biggest mistakes that Harry Catterick made. Yeah. He left Everton to become Footballer of the Year. Yeah, and of course we were no angels. Our hard man Tony Kay didn't play in that game, but we still had Jimmy Gabriel and Roy Vernon and Dennis Stevens and others that I better not name, who weren't shy. And I remember most about the game. It was games in the 60s. They weren't that greatly attended. I think there'd only be about 45,000 there. From the era of, I mentioned before, when you had the 60s, 70,000s. I think football was losing a bit of its appeal at that time, and Leeds showed up, and we'd only been playing 2-3 minutes, and Sandy Brown got sent off. Yeah. Johnny Giles, who had been a wonderful, skillful winger at Manchester United, but he went to Leeds, and you know, I think they taught him how to go over the ball. Yeah. And he put his studs up onto Brown's chest and ripped his shirt open. Yeah. So Sandy just thumped him. And I mean, he poleaxed him. We thought, you know, this lad's going to be carried off. And years later, I'd said to Sandy, and we know through the Former Players Foundation, I got to know many of these people. Yeah. And I said to Sandy, what was that about? Yeah. 3 minutes into the game, and he said, my parents weren't married. Right. So, so to Sandy, that was the greatest insult. Yeah. So Sandy got sent off. We played for about half an hour with 10 men. Yeah. And then the whole thing went crazy with tattles. I mean, I think we were as bad as Leeds. Yeah. The tattles were savage. It was one after another. There was no continuity to the game. It was one nasty foul after another. And then I think in about the 35th minute, the full-back, who actually had scored for Leeds, which turned out to be the winner, called Willie Bell, he tackled, I think he'd done a Cantona kung fu kick on Derek Temple.
Right.
And they took Derek off on a stretcher, and he sort of leads, a bit of professionalism. They carried their guy off, with his arms round the trainer's neck type of thing. And the referee took them off, and you see that great picture of Brian LeBone, who's at 6'2", 3", little Bobby Collins, 5'3", and behind them are all these naughty boys. They look like they pushed the referee too far, so he just took them all off, and we didn't know what was going to happen. We thought the game was going to be abandoned, and as it was, they had a 10-minute cooling off period, which didn't work. And then they brought them back on, and they just carried on. Yeah, it was just a battle. It was a disgrace to football, and it was a disgrace to the Everton side, who were a really quality footballing team. And as you know, Leeds could play football, as they showed, a few years later. Yeah, but it was one of those terrible days. Yeah, so that's obviously etched in my memory.
Yeah. Before we move on to your next game, I've got to ask you about some of those players from the 60s. I mean, Alex Young, you were very close to him.
I was a very good friend of Alex, yeah.
Just what was it that, maybe supporters of other clubs don't sort of understand it, the feeling that he had from the Evertonians, and why that was and what it was as a footballer, because if you've not seen him play, and it's of course Harry Catrick sort of shunned the limelight, he didn't like the cameras coming to Goodison, so there's not a lot of footage of him. Just what was it about Alex Young?
I always say when it comes to Everton, when it comes to Goodison, there were two gods of Goodison that I know of from my indoctrination. There was Dixie Dean, who was the god of goals, and there was Alex Young, the god of skills. Yeah. Dixie Dean is remembered by the number of times he put the ball in the net. Alex Young is remembered by the number of times he took our breath away. Yeah, he was sensational. His ability, skills were unbelievable. He'd do things in a match that people wouldn't even attempt in training. And I have to say that I made a film called Alex the Great, about a documentary about Alex, which I always think that we always pay tribute to people after they passed away. Yeah. And I wanted Alex to feel the love that the fans had for him just before he died. Yes. So we did this film. We showed it in Goodison. We showed it in London, and luckily Alex got to come to it. Yeah. And in the film, I think one of the greatest tributes is made by Ron Yates, the captain of Liverpool, who said that he was the best centre forward of Ron Yates' era in Britain. He was so talented. Yeah. He was graceful. He was elegant. He would have graced any era. His level of skill level would have been, it was. He would have fitted into any era. Now, people think, well, he was 5'6" or something, blonde hair, whatever, not the most muscular of guys. But he worked down the pit. He served in the army. He was a tough lad. Yeah. He had in those days players like Young. I'm trying to think the equivalent is it would have been at Liverpool, but players like Young, they had protection. They always had a minder, and Jimmy Gabriel was Alex Young's minder. So if anybody smacked Young, they knew what was coming from Jimmy Gabriel. Yeah, that's how it was back then. Yeah,
and of course the Holy Trinity, Harvey, Kendall, Ball. I think it was when your book on the Holy Trinity, I think that we first met.
I think we did do. Becky Talentine and I wrote the Holy Trinity, and we got the opportunity to interview everyone. Yeah, everyone who played with them. Of course, we did with Alan and Howard and Colin, and then we interviewed the fans of my era, and also younger eras who had heard it. The talk being passed down. When it came to the Holy Trinity, they just dominated games. But I'd like to mention someone who never gets the credit, which is Colin Harvey. Colin Harvey was an outstanding footballer, and of course a local lad. He oozed grace, and because he had a bit of niggle about him as well, but he could play, Colin. He really could. And it was very sad that he had all sorts of injuries. He had optic injuries, and he had hip injury. But he was a tremendous footballer, and of course a tremendous Evertonian. Yeah. But can I just go back a little bit so I can maybe I should caution your viewers here what not to do. When I went to my first game when I was 9, my dad, we moved from the slum up to the council houses, which was fantastic because we had a garden. Yeah. And we were near the railway station. So my dad let me go on my own to the home games. Okay. So I'd go from Widnes to Liverpool Central Station on my own. I'd meet people. There weren't many Evertonians in Widnes. Yeah. There were no Copites in Liverpool. No offence to anyone. Yeah. Sorry, in Widnes, no Copites in Liverpool. Of course, there was a reason for that. Was they were in the second division at the time, and it wasn't that. Yeah. Maybe they were there, but they didn't. It didn't make much noise. And I would go and I'd go with whoever was on the platform at the station. We just went along. So I went in all different parts of the ground. And then when I was 12, my parents allowed me to go to away games on my own. So most of the away games I went to were, of course, there were a lot of Lancashire teams in the first division at that time, the Blackburns, the Burnleys, the Prestons, the Blackpools. There were lots of them. And so I'd come into Liverpool, get the train, normally from Exchange, to go to those places, or I'd get the train to Manchester from Widnes. But also more difficult places to get to. I'd go to Speke. I'd get the Croswell to Speke. I'd get the Home James was the name of the coach firm. Oh, right. It took us from the Speke Dunlop factory to wherever it was. When I got to 14, I decided I'd make a career of hitchhiking. Wow. Yeah. And you've heard this. I know where this one's going. You know where this is going. So I was hitchhiked. Yeah. And the reason for that is in Widnes, it's a transportation hub. It still is. Yeah. From the chemical industry then was vibrant. The whole town was chemicals, and there were all these trucks taking these chemicals to different parts of the country. Yeah. And so we had come up with a plan. I had a friend I called Tommy, who was a little bit older than me, and my mother didn't like him because he smoked. Okay. Right. He was a bad influence, was Tommy. Yeah. And we would go to, we'd catch the bus to the Bold Transport Cafe, which is on the way to Warrington. Okay. And that's where the drivers of these wagons full of chemicals would stop and have the breakfast before they set off on the journeys. And you got to remember, at that time, there wasn't necessarily the motorway system that we have now. No. So a lot of it was A roads. There were some motorways, but it wasn't... The trunk roads. Yeah, there was the M6 was in place. So we'd go to the transport cafe, and Tommy would send me in. I was a 14-year-old little squirt, who I should say at that time couldn't read. I was slow, and I hadn't learned to read at that time. So I went into this transport cafe, and I'd go in, and all the guys were there, and I'd say, I'm going to Leicester. I'm going to watch Everton at Leicester. Anybody want to give me a lift? And, they'd look up from their full English breakfast and, look down again and ignore me. So I'd go out, and then Tommy would say, go back in and charm them. So he'd send me back in, and I'd go back in and said, I don't know if you heard me, but I'm going to Leicester to watch Everton play at Leicester. And if you give me a lift, I promise to listen to your boring stories about your wife, your kids, and your dog. And it worked every time. Yeah. And after a while, we sort of had a little group of drivers who would look after us. Okay. I mean, it really was. They were looking after us. And the thing about trucks was getting lifts off trucks was they had radios and heaters, which were optional extras in cars in those days. Very luxurious. So we'd go everywhere. Yeah. Now I'm going to get you to the story, your favourite story. And hopefully people are still hanging in on this. Yeah. So one time we didn't get the lift down to where we were hopefully going, and we got dropped off on the M6 at Knutsford. Yeah. And on the access road, and we were thumbing. And I've told you this before. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a magical digit. It can make the body move at 70 miles an hour. Yeah. if you're lucky. Yeah. Because, hitchhiking is, it teaches you how to judge people. Yeah. It teaches you how to deal with disappointment, rejection, because you got all these people who pass you and ignore you. And anyway, we were hitchhiking, and this guy shows up in the Triumph Herald. Funny how you remember these things. Yeah. There's a good reason why. It was a two-tone Triumph Herald, 4-door. He stopped. We looked at him, made our quick assessment of whether he was safe to get in the car with. He had very strong, thick glasses. He wore a sports coat with leather patches. He looked like a school teacher. Yeah. And he had on his hands, he had these calf skin, very smooth leather gloves, driving gloves with holes around the knuckles. Yeah. So we got in. Great, where are you going? We're going to Stoke. We're going to Stoke on this occasion. The old Victoria ground. Get in, he said. And we'd been going about 5 minutes. You know what happens next. He takes one of his gloves off. He undoes his fly. And he started playing with himself. Well, we didn't know what to say. We were giggling like daft lads. And my friend Tommy, who was sat at the front, said, "Oh, put that away, you're frightening the traffic." Which I thought was a great thing for a 15-year-old to say. Which point the guy hit the brakes and bundles out of the car like two unwanted puppies on the side of the M6.
Yeah.
So now we're stuck on the M6, and as you know, drivers can't stop in England on the motorway, as my mum said, but they can slow down and give you false hope. So we were there stranded on the M6, halfway towards the Knutsford services. Yeah. And of course, what shows up next is the police. Two big bobbies in one of these lovely Jaguars that you see in the Morse TV programs. Yeah. Absolutely wonderful car, and he gets, he's, "What? Get in, you two, Where the hell are you going?" So we get in the car, and they were really kind to us, and we'd set off. And about 10 minutes later, they said to us, "What are you doing here? Tell us a story while you're there." And we did do. And it was shocked. And they said, "What did he look like, the driver?" And my friend said, Tommy said, "About 4 inches and circumcised."
Wow. There's a cautionary tale for all away days.
I must add that I've had that word cleared by the people at the Echo.
Yeah, we've got the approval of that. But moving swiftly on from Dr. Francis' emotional stories tales, and a more happy occasion, the Borussia Mönchengladbach European Cup. Bizarrely, Everton led the way when it came to winning penalty shootouts.
They did indeed. I remember it well. We were champions. I was living in Manchester at the time, and I was hitchhiking to home games. I didn't go to many away games then because I just didn't have the funds to do it. And the deal of hitchhiking to Goodison from Manchester, it was a 2-step approach. Yeah, you got to the Haydock roundabout. Yeah. If you could get to the Haydock roundabout, it was easy because you got all the traffic coming off the M6, and if you got your scarf on, they're always going to pick you up. Yeah. Getting back maybe a little bit more difficult, but you had to get to the Haydock roundabout. So I'd gone this night, and it was sensational. We'd drawn 1-1 over there. Howard Kendall scored a cracking goal, and we came back, and John Morrissey scored in the first or second minute. Maybe a bit of a fluke. It was a centre. John may not agree with this, but it would seem like a floated centre cross, and everyone left it. Joe went to head it, but he moved his head back, Joe Rao, and it crept in. Yeah. They unfortunately equalised towards the end. They were a good team, as all German teams were. Yeah. They had Bertie Voigt, I don't know if you remember. He was the captain at the time. And it went to this, we'd never seen it before, penalty shootout. And what I remember most about it is we didn't know how it worked. Yeah, I mean,
like now
we'd never seen it before. We didn't know how it worked and whatever. And I think somebody had to describe it to us, over the intercom, the public address system. That there would be 5 penalties each and whatever. Yeah. And Gordon West didn't play in the game. He was our first team goalkeeper, but Gordon had dips in form. And he'd been replaced at this time by Andy Rankin, who was a local lad from Bootle. Lovely and agile goalkeeper. Lovely lad. A bit small compared to today's standards, but a bit small, light, but what he lacked in height, he made up in agility. Yeah. So I'll walk you through it. The game finishes. They're all gathered in the centre circle. Gordon West has come on to the pitch. He's in his all blue tracksuit. Yeah. And Gordon was the character in the dressing room. Yeah. He laid down the law. He was the discipline in the dressing room. He would discipline people. He would put people in their place and tell them how to, to conduct themselves professionally with younger people or people who were a bit big-headed in the way. And they all gathered in the centre circle, and Joe was the first one up to take the penalty. Joe could hit a ball, and he hit it right down the middle. Unfortunately, the goalkeeper didn't move. Yeah. And he went straight into the goalkeeper's chest, which was a big blow and for everyone, including Joe. And then the Germans scored a couple. Our lads I think it was John Morrissey, Howard Kendall, Alan Ball. And I have to say to all the Alan Ball fans, he wasn't the greatest penalty taker.
He missed a few.
He had missed a few. John Morrissey was excellent. Howard produced a cracker. And then the German missed. The Germans slid one just on the wrong side of the post. So we were level going into the last two penalties. Up came Sandy Brown. Now, Sandy had this rocket of a shot. Not necessarily, he didn't know what direction it was going to go in, but he could hit this ball hard. I think it was the Daily Mirror had done a competition around that time to find the hardest kicker of a football in the country. And Brown had come second to Peter Lorimer of Leeds, who he had two Scotsmen. Anyway, while Sandy's preparing preparing his thunderbolt, his rocket to go into the back of the net, Gordon West approached Andy Rankin to give him some advice, given the fact that Gordon was playing for England. And he said the next guy up is this defender called Müller from Borussia Dortmund. And he said, I've watched him, I've studied him, I've researched him. He said, I've done my homework. He said, he's right-footed, and he's going to open his body, and he's going to go to your left. So Andy, dive early to the left. So Sandy Brown smacks the ball in the net.
Everton 1-0.
Yeah. So we now one ahead. And this poor guy, Müller, the defender, goes up, hits the ball. Andy goes to the right, goes early to the right and saves it. And afterwards, Gordon approached Andy and said, oh, good job. Nobody listens to my advice.
Wow. Because I remember reading a report from the time, from the Echo, and they said, old-timers say that the Everton 6, Sunderland 4 Cup replay was the greatest game at Goodison, and they were saying they said that must have been a great game because this sort of would rival it. And like say, just beating the Germans on penalties.
Beating the Germans on penalties. But we'd never seen anything like it before. We didn't know what would have happened after the 5 penalties taken each, and we didn't know about it. They just continue. Anyway, we went through, and of course we got knocked out by Panathinaikos. We had a bad day. Yeah, a bad day at Goodison, a bad day in Greece. So maybe people say we were robbed in Greece, but I don't know. We messed it up at Goodison. Yeah,
I mean, there's just obviously a fallow period. I mean, it seems relatively short by contemporary standards of 14 years without a trophy, but then obviously the mid-80s were a great time to be an Evertonian again, but the circumstances have changed a lot from you. You're talking about hitchhiking from Manchester. By this time you're working, you're already working in the oil industry in,
I was,
in the USA?
I'd left school. I'd struggled to read until I was 14. I just didn't get it. And I'd gone secondary modern school, and I enjoyed school. And I left school at 15, and there weren't that many jobs for the likes of me. And so eventually I got an apprenticeship as a gas fitter, which changed my life. And this gas board encouraged me to go to tech college. Now I could read. The world had opened up to me. And whilst kids, the rest of the lads, they went to tech college, they got 1 day a week type of thing, and they sort of skived off, or didn't take it serious. I studied, and I went to tech college in Birkenhead, in Riversdale, in Aigburth, and in St Helens, and I did so well that the gas board said, well, we'd like to send you to the Royal College of Advanced Technology, which sounds very prestigious. But the day I got there, it changed its name to the University of Salford.
Okay.
So I went to Salford, which was great. And I struggled, as you'd imagine. I didn't have the background that these lads from grammar schools and public schools they all had. I struggled, but I put my head down. I wasn't a drinker, so I didn't go out I went out socialised, but you know, in those days there was a lot of drinking went on at university. So I studied, and I did very well. I finished up with 4 degrees.
Yeah,
I was educated in 3 different countries, in Britain, in Germany, and in the United States. I finished up the PhD, and I always think people always say to me, "Why do you use the courtesy title doctor?" Well, if you come from a slum in Widnes where you only have one light bulb, I think you're allowed to call yourself doctor.
Yeah.
And my mum used to say, "My son's a doctor, but not the type that helps people."
Okay. But you were high flyer in Houston by this,
I did.
point.
I went to the university in Purdue in Indiana.
Yeah.
And I got about 8 scholarships, about 6 different medals for my research.
Yeah.
I never thought myself as a scientist. It was just I think I was a better scientist than I was a gas fitter.
Yeah.
You know, with no disrespect to the people with this, I wasn't very good at the gas fitting. But then when I left, I got an MBA at Purdue, and I had to come back to UK as a part of the scholarship that I got. And I was approached by Senator Edward Kennedy to move to the United States, which I was appreciative of, and I worked for his people in the nuclear and the NASA, and for NASA, and the nuclear business at Oak Ridge, Tennessee, which was a secretive lab where they made weapons. And then after I'd served my 2 years for them, I was headhunted by an oil company. Yeah. I was 32, but between that, I'd got married.
Yeah.
From a lovely lady, as I've said once on the BBC, the most decent person I've ever met. Yeah. A lovely lady, and she's not with me at the moment because she's very ill. But she had the intervention when we got married, which was, I'm not going to stop you watching Everton. Yeah. You know, I dread to think, that's a part of your DNA. But she said, you were a slow learner for 14 years. You were a fast learner for 14 years. You've got to retire when you're 42 and do something more worthwhile with your life than work. Because I'm a workaholic. I throw myself into things that I have, very high standards and what I like to do. So that was the deal when she married me. Yeah. That was it's called the Malta Protocol. It was the intervention on our honeymoon. And seriously, that's the deal, So that's what I did. I worked, I was an executive in our company in Houston. Had tremendous experience for a lad from Widnes. Yeah. I was 25 years younger than anybody else on the executive. Yeah. And they gave me some advice, which was I had to buy an expensive suit. Yeah. And I had to grow a moustache, and I hate to say it, but I looked like a porn star from the 70s with this bloody moustache.
Well, we had Derek Melfield in the other week, so you probably look like him.
I think I was more like Tom Selleck. Yeah. I'd look like that or a prison inmate from Colorado or something.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's how I looked for all those years, to look older, to fit in. Yeah. And they gave me, when the young guy, the young one on the executive, they give you all these responsibilities. I had companies that I looked after, operating companies, chemicals, obviously, chemicals, uranium and nuclear and copper mining. And then I had worldwide responsibilities, which include everything in profit improvement, strategic planning, environmental affairs, in business development, the whole thing worldwide. So that gave me the opportunity to visit the UK on a regular basis, which I would do at least once a month. Yeah, work reasons. This is while I was working. Yeah, and it worked out pretty good. I had my season ticket. Yeah, I could pop over. Hopefully with the home games. But sometimes I took in it had to be the away games. Or if I stayed for more than a few games, a few days, I could get both in. Yeah. So on a Friday, I would leave Houston on a Friday, and I'd go and see my mum. Drive up to without problem. But the only problem I had one time was it Hertz, rental car. And the only car that they had was red. Wow. And I refused to take it. Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a non-starter. Yeah, not negotiable.
So they upgrade. Well, they didn't upgrade me. Upgraded me to this kind of truck type of thing.
Truck instead.
This van type of thing. Yeah. But I couldn't show up because I couldn't show up at Goodison in a red car. Yeah. And And I did that on a regular basis. Yeah. And, of course, that was the time it was easy to be an Evertonian. Yeah. It was easy to be an Evertonian in the 60s. You got the likes of Alex Young and Bobby Collins, Alan Ball, Colin Harvey. And then in the 70s, it wasn't that difficult, although Liverpool were coming on extremely strong. Yeah. But I'd emigrated by then, so I didn't have that much of that. But we had the Bob Latchfords and the likes. And then, of course, in the 80s, Howard and Colin had put the team together. Yeah. And it was smashing time to be an Evertonian. Yeah. When I think that now, and with respect to this century, how difficult it must be for young kids. Yes. I really take my hat off to them. I take my hat off to the lads who go to the away fixtures. Yeah. And the dedication. I mean, I've travelled 2 million miles following Everton. Yeah. Right. But I take my hat off to those lads. Yeah. Who travel a couple of 100 miles on a wet whatever night.
And they've only ever known.
Ever known disappointment. Yeah. Yeah. Or confusion or drama. Yeah.
Yeah, but on a bright note, which takes us to your penultimate match, which is the Sunderland one. It's towards the end of the 84-85 season. It's the game you really believed that Everton were really onto something at this point.
Yeah, this game happened. It's not a significant game in the eyes of most people, except maybe for the goals that were scored. Some of the three finest goals that I've seen at Goodison, and I think the greatest pass I've ever seen at Goodison.
Oh, brave.
But it was just before the Bayern. I think it was between the Bayern Munich games. Yeah, I think we'd drawn in Bayern Munich, and it was I think just the week before the famous tie. But we played Sunderland, and we went down 1-0, and the lads came back, and the quality of the goals was outstanding. You must look at it.
Yeah, the diving header in front of the Gladys Street. Yeah.
I can picture it. Yeah. Peter Reid, bombing down the wing. Peter smashing football, crossing it over, and Andy Gray getting his head to it in, I guess, the Dixie Dean kind of fashion. Yeah. Just incredible goal. He scored another one like it shortly afterwards. Yeah. And then the third goal that we all talk about is Trevor Stevens' goal, where the ball comes out, Derek Mountford plays it out to Paul Bracewell, who doesn't even look. It's one of these no-look balls. He's got his face in his own goal, and he hits it 50 yards into the path of Trevor Stevens. Mm-hmm. It's just a remarkable pass. And I'd asked Paul about that, and he said, we practiced it and trained. It was just, he knew it was coming up. Yeah. And, of course, Trevor Stevens just cracked it into the net. Yeah. And I looked then at that game, when you've seen something special. And on my way back, I would have been back to my mother's that night. I just thought to myself, this is a proper team. Yeah, this is up there with the whole of Trinity and the Golden Vision. These lads are going to be champions.
Yeah. I mean, with your work with the Gladys Street Hall of Fame and all the dinners and stuff, they certainly get the appreciation for you, and Evertonians give them the love. But with the film Howard's Way, perhaps sort of showing the appreciation. I just wonder whether fans of other clubs sort of give them the kudos they deserve, that particular team, because they don't tend to be talked about amongst non-Evertonians in a way that perhaps they should be, perhaps because of events with history and what happened, and they didn't go on to win the European Cup because they weren't given the chance. But just what an incredible team that was.
Yeah, but I think, though, it's... and I would say the same about many other clubs. They don't get the recognition. Yeah. There are certain clubs that get more than they deserve. I mean, it always gets me. As you know, I used to have the famous number plate. Yeah. Which, can I mention that?
Yeah, you can mention a number plate. You mentioned the other thing, so you mentioned a number plate.
I had two number plates in Arizona. One is EFC 1878, and one was H8 LFC. Yeah. Which caused quite a stir. And I would get all these people from... visitors from the United Kingdom would come and, smash on the horn and give me the thumbs up, etc. And that was until the authorities took it away from me. Right? Yeah. But I remember this coming from a guy from Tottenham. They stopped me at the traffic lights and, put a worm down his window and said, whatever. And he said he supported Tottenham. And I hate to say it, but I never think of them as anything. I don't know when. I mean, they won the league in the 60s, early 60s.
Yeah,
they did the double with Danny Blanchard and Dave Mackay, but they've never won anything.
Yeah.
But then the players are always have always been in the media. They've always been highlighted, whereas people don't know who Alex Young is. They don't know who Colin Harvey is. I doubt if they know who Graham Sharp is.
Yeah. Yeah.
We just, that's just the nature of it. We're not a media favourite and never have been, which is fine.
Yeah.
As long as our love for the club is as much as any. I don't think any football fans love the club as much as we love it.
Yeah.
Of course, everyone loves their own clubs, and everyone thinks their own clubs are special.
Yeah. Which takes us to a very poignant final choice from yourself. It's around that same time, November '85, the Arsenal game. And as your mother, reading your autobiography, Mark Carsley, was it? You refer to in that one, bit of a more modern day reference. But if you want to explain that one,
I told Lee Carsley this, that I named everyone in my book has a name.
Yeah,
right. And I called my mother, who was a Geordie, who, when she got excited, sounded like Paul Gascoigne, and you couldn't understand the words she said, which was a good thing.
Yeah.
I told Lee Carsley that I called my mother in the book Mark Carsley because he wasn't fully appreciated while he was there.
Yeah.
But he could never be replaced.
Yeah.
And I think that's true about Lee. Nobody really understood how good he was in as a defensive midfielder. We may remember his goal against Liverpool, but even then he was buried under a pile of players.
Yeah, he was actually on that picture, was he? Was underneath.
You never saw him, and Tim Cahill took the credit for it, didn't he? So my mother, my dad, she had a stroke when in the 80s, and my dad left her, which is very sad. And so when you've been away from home, the bonds you have with your mother, etc., get even stronger. She wrote to me every week. I wrote to her every week. Her letter was the same letter every week. My mum comes from near Penshire Monument up. As she always says, she comes from the same place as Brian Robson and Colin Todd.
Okay,
Chesterley Street. Yeah. Right? But near there is Penshire Monument, which is a folly, a replica of the Pantheon in Greece.
Right.
In Athens. So she wanted to go and see the real one. Yeah. So off we go to do that. Right? Oh, it gets better. Yeah. Right?
Sean Dyche was infamously underwhelmed when he went there.
Really?
The Grand Canyon, which is by you, but yeah.
She wanted to go to Acapulco and listen to the mariachi band. Yeah. She wanted to paddle in the Pacific Ocean. This is a little lady from, she worked in the laundry. She'd got all these things that she wanted to do. I'd like to go to the Empire State Building. Right. So we did them all. I mean, we did all these things.
Had she travelled much before this? Or?
Oh, she'd gone to Spain and, and she'd done those things. But no, she hadn't done. Yeah. And these are things that she'd longed to do. She wanted to go stay at the Savoy Hotel. Yeah. Smashing. I mean, she caused a nuisance at the Savoy Hotel because she was in the room and they have all buttons around the wall. Like they used to have in pubs. You can press the button and the valet comes and whatever. And when I got back to the hotel, the concierge, the manager, came to me and said, "Can you tell your mother to stop pressing the buttons? She's driving everybody crazy." Yeah. And this little old lady from Widnes had pressing all these buttons in this very posh hotel. And then they took her for tea at the Ritz. And she was enjoying herself as she would. She'd loved all this type of thing. She couldn't believe that she was doing these things. And she said to me, "David," she said, "behind you, don't look behind you. Look behind you." She said, "Who's that ugly man with Jerry Hall?"
Oh, Mick Jagger.
Oh, it's Mick Jagger. And of course, I'm looking like this. So we'd done all these things. And she said, "David, I'm exhausted now. And there's one last thing I'd like to do. And I wonder if we could do it together." And I said, "Yeah, well, I'd like to go to Goodison one last time." So I said, "Fine." So I wrote to, and this was in the day of fax machines. Yeah. So I faxed to Jim Greenwood, who I didn't know. I just said my mum's had a bit of bad luck and whatever, and she's really asked if you could do something special for her at Goodison. I got a fax back maybe an hour and a half later that all it said was Saturday, Arsenal, 12:30 players entrance. Mm-hmm. See you there. Tell her not to bring her boots. That type of thing. And we went and we got there, and Gordon Watson, who became a Geordie, who became a lovely, he'd been the coach, player, he'd won the league in 38, 39. He'd been the coach of Alan Ball and those people, Harry Catterick's coach. He was now serving as the tour guide.
Yeah.
They didn't really do tours in those days. So he met us and we did the tour. Of course, we had a few trophies to show back then. Yeah. We did the tour, and I thought it was great. That's smashing. I'm really pleased Everton had done this for my mum. And Gordon said, well, would you like to meet Howard? Another Geordie. Yeah. They were all clicked together, these people. So I said, yeah, of course we would. So we go to the dressing room, first team dressing room, game against Arsenal. And Howard came out to meet my mum, and she knew her name. My mum's name was Una, an unusual name, and Una. So he said, David, he says, you sit over there with Colin, and I'll take care of your mum. So I was thrilled, sitting next to Colin Harvey, lovely guy, hero. And my mum sat in the car and sit there, Una, and he then went about introducing all the lads to her. So Kevin Richardson wasn't playing, another Geordie. He wasn't playing that game, so he sat with her, I think maybe as an interpreter. and then Derek Mountfield came, Peter Reid came, Big Nev came, give her a big hug and whatever. And they were all coming, and my mum could, she knew about them. She could, she could interact with them. She could engage them, and of course, they were all quite pleased to meet her.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Gary Stevens shows up. And Gary's a lovely lad, handsome-looking guy, athletic guy. He comes up and they make way for him. He sits next to my mum, and they're all smiling. And my mum turns to Gary and says, Gary says, how did you get the nickname Shaka Stevens?
Wow.
And there was this roar of laughter. Yeah. And now, others were poking their heads around. Graham Sharp was poking his head. What the hell's caused this roar of laughter? Yeah. And of course, they're all taking the mickey out of Gary. Yeah. So then it was a really uplift in what was going on. So she engaged with them for a little bit longer, and then Colin said, it's time, your mum got to go now. The boys want to take the clothes off. And I thought, well, we better not tell her that. I never get rid of it. So we... I picked her up and off we go, and we'd gone through. I think Gordon Watson had taken us through out of the first team dressing room, and Howard came running behind us. He said, "There's one other thing, And Kevin Sheedy was in tow. Yeah. Kevin said to her, "Ewan," said, "when I score today, your name is going to be on the ball."
Yeah.
Of course, he didn't score, but we won 6-1.
Yeah.
And for many years on, Howard used to say to me, "How's your mum?"
Yeah.
He said, we should have got to there every game. Yeah. Because it really lifted the lads' spirits. Just a little bit of humour, and it takes away the tension.
Yeah. Don't know how we top that one, but just finally then. Now, I mean, like you say, everyone thinks their own team is special, their own club is special, but Goodison Park is unique, the first purpose-built football ground in English football, and staged the most top-flight matches of any ground. Hopefully, obviously, it will be hosting Premier League football, we hope, next season for its final season. Just what is it you think you will miss the most about Goodison Park?
In my life, I've lived in 22 homes.
Yeah.
I've lived in 22 houses, but I've only ever had one home.
Yeah.
For me, Goodison has been many things. When I couldn't read, it was like a sanctuary.
Yeah.
I was treated as an equal. I was surrounded by friendship, camaraderie, compassion. I was tiny. People would always look after you.
Yeah.
And so really what I'm going to miss is going with us to the new ground. It's the fans.
Yeah.
They're special.
Yeah.
Whatever, from the young ones to the old ones, it's special. But I'll miss Goodison. Now, not knowing, when's the last time I'll be at the match, I always pause. I think I upset the people behind me who were trying to get out. Before I get out, I always pause in the walkway and just take it all in, take a deep breath, and take it all in and just look at it. And it is a spiritual type of place.
Yeah.
I think I'm very lucky to have enjoyed the time I've had at Goodison, the people I've met, the players, the fans, the managers, etc. And it's been a great time.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for a very special Goodison Park, my home, Dr. David France.
Thank you.